Welcome to episode 6 of the Wabash and Erie Canal tour through Gibson County. This is the last episode of our journey in said county. In this episode, we're going to travel from the east side of Interstate 69 to the Warrick County line, with our focal area being along County Roads 900 South and 650 East. In particular, the Smith Fork Culvert, Lock 71, and Road Bridge 156. Picking up from episode 5, on the east side of Interstate 69, traveling east on County Road 900 South, the Wabash and Erie Canal is off to the left, just off of the roadway on the far side of the water ditch. The tree line to the left marks the location of the berm. The canal is running at an east-southeasterly direction at this point. Now you can see the berm off on the left. The canal will actually cross this county road ahead. As the canal intersects with this road, the berm is right up against it, thus making the road part of the canal bed. This road did not exist during the period of the canal's operation. This area is located in the floodplain of Pigeon Creek, thus leading me to believe that this would have been a forested area during that period. Panning the camera to the south side of the road, you will start to see that a towpath will emerge on the right side. What you are seeing in front of you is mostly spoilage from the ditch that has been dug out, but beyond this spoilage is the location of the towpath. Southbound on County Road 650 East looking west, this clump of trees is actually a small portion of the canal, and the green grass between the road and the trees is the bed of the canal. Again, like County Road 900 South, this portion of the county road did not exist at the time of the canal. However, once this road turns east, that portion, which will become modern-day County Road 650 East, was present. County Road 650 East is locally known as Towpath Road because it was the towpath for the canal after the aforementioned bend. On the far side is the berm of the canal. Obviously in the middle is the bed, and with the county road we are on being the towpath, thus creating the canal prism. At this bend, as the canal and roadways turns south towards State Road 57, the canal gets extremely wide in this area. The canal at this point is probably close to 80 feet wide, and in some towns this would be considered the width of a basin. This section is twice the width of the engineered canal in most places. I believe the canal is so wide through here for two reasons. First, the boats are pushing 90 foot long, and they don't turn on a dime. These boats need a wide radius to make a 90-degree turn, which is close to what is occurring in this area. Another reason why I believe this section of canal is so wide is because of Lock 70 and 71. Lock 70's location, discussed in episode 5, is a 1 3/4 miles upstream or northwest of this spot. And Lock 71 is a 1/4 mile south of this bend. All locks were 1 lane wide, with an average width of 18 to 20 feet along this section of canal. Because the locks are 1 lane wide, this would create a bottleneck along the canal. The extra wide section of canal could be used as a holding area or a basin to stage canal boats that were heading south or northbound. This section of canal has 4 distinct features located here. The first feature was a small culvert, followed by a much larger culvert, the Smith Fork of Pigeon Creek. The largest feature in the area is next in line, which was Lock 71, just a couple hundred feet south of the Smith Fork culvert. And the last major feature of this area, south of the lock, was Road Bridge 156. The first feature in this area was a small culvert for a seasonal stream that came through this area, and it was just north of our location. There is no evidence of its survival to this day, but we have a good indication of its location based on the 1853 audit and the historical maps of the area. In the 1853 audit, it's described as one space 9 by 2 feet clear. The length of the culvert was 99 feet. Top of the culvert was 3.5 feet below the bottom of the canal. Covering and part of the sides were planked. The second culvert, which was much larger, was located at this spot. This culvert allowed for the Smith Fork of Pigeon Creek to pass under. Let's take a closer look at Smith Fork of Pigeon Creek. Now this was a wooden arch culvert, so it was not completely submerged all the time, and it was only 2 foot below the bottom of the canal. So it was a very shallow culvert. Let me show you where that was located. Culvert 214, Smith's Fork. It was a timber arch of 28 feet chord, ring 21 inches deep. The length of the culvert from face to face was 86 feet. The top of the arch was 1.5 feet below the bottom of the canal. The crown of the arch was planked. The stream before you today is the remnant of the original Smith Fork. In the same era that the Patoka River dredging occurred, that was mentioned in episode 1 of this series, Pigeon Creek and some of its tributaries were also dredged. One of those tributaries was Smith Fork. Today, Smith Fork is east of our location and is a larger stream that drains a large section of eastern Gibson County. The old channel of Smith Fork is what the Wabash and Erie Canal would have crossed, and the ditch that meanders through the woods is what's left of it. The modern culvert that goes underneath the roadway is the location of the Smith Fork culvert. Understand the modern pipe sits just above where the wooden culvert would have been. Looking downstream at the canal path as it goes through here, between the berm and the modern dredge ditch, you can see the flattened area of land extending toward the road. This was the original bottom of the canal. Culvert 214, Smith's Fork. It was a timber arch of 28 feet chord, ring 21 inches deep. The length of the culvert from face to face was 86 feet. The top of the arch was 1.5 feet below the bottom of the canal. The crown of the arch was planked. Now this lock was one of the last locks built, as far as I know. So this would have been built circa 1851, 1852, maybe even as late as 1853. So this is not nearly as old as box culvert 203 is. But nonetheless, you still have the timber still visible here. These timber locks were made of the crib design. They built a crib. They had cross members that intersected with each other and locked it in place. And then instead of using stone in these areas, they just filled it up with dirt just to hold it in place. If they didn't do that, there was the possibility that it would float. It would come up out of the ground and float away. And they didn't want that to happen. So they used dirt to fill it in here. A colleague and I have had suspicion for many years that this was the location of the lock. But it wasn't until just recently that a local individual conveyed to me that as a kid he used to actually swim and skate inside the lock. Additionally, using the measurements provided from the engineer's reports in 1849 and 1853, we were able to confirm the location. Lock 71 had a lift of 6 feet. Standing on the towpath looking down into the area of Lock 71, we're near the north end of it, you will see there are timbers visible. These timbers are regularly exposed to air but have managed to survive many years, but not without damage. We know that this wood is a type of oak. It is believed that it is a white oak because research shows that white oak was used for construction of several of these types of structures in this area of Indiana. Some timbers are still submerged underwater, but not all of them. In 2020, the Gibson County Highway Department came through and dredged this area because there were issues with the roadway, and in the process they pulled out some of the old timbers, which was a blessing and a cursing. Now, more timbers were ultimately exposed, leading to more decay because of air exposure. But let's go to the other side of the dredge, and I'll show you what is located there. Let me first state this is private property. You must obtain permission before accessing it. I have reached out to the owner and obtained permission for that access. Starting back at the Smith Fork Culvert, heading southbound, the canal prism through here again is much wider. The towpath is on the roadway off on the right hand side of the screen, which is west. On the far left hand side of the screen is the true berm of the canal. But notice what looks like a berm developing in the middle. Let's talk about this middle berm and what's really happening here a little bit more in depth. This middle berm at this point is actually spoilage from years of dredging the ditch that is in the canal. Now remember, the ditch is actually dug below the bottom of the canal. How do I know this is spoilage? It's undulating, not uniform, and very inconsistent in its height, width, and design. It's not consistent with the engineering standards of the towpath or the berm. The soil is very sloppily put in place. So what you're getting ready to see is the lock tumble, which is an overflow of water going around the lock when it is in the closed or unused position. Lock tumbles are constructed to prevent water from backing up into the canal, causing it to overflow its sides. In this particular area of Lock 71, the tumble is still intact, and what you're going to see is a wet, low-lying area just downstream of the tumble. Additionally, the middle berm is intact as well. The middle berm being what's separating the lock from the tumble and its downstream channel. As you can see in this picture, I try to depict what was and is here. To the east is the visible berm. The towpath is the roadway on the west. The middle, you have the lock, a berm, and the lock tumble with its associated channel. I will point these features out as we proceed south through this area. We are approaching the lock tumble. This is the location where the water would bypass around the lock. On the right-hand side of your screen is the middle berm, and on the far left-hand side is the actual berm of the canal. Notice there is no physical berm downstream of this tumble. That's because it was taken out to allow for drainage of the area. The berm was there, and it would actually have curved around to the canal below the lock, allowing the water to flow back into the canal after coming over the tumble when the lock was not in use. Standing on the middle berm looking west, this is the location of Lock 71. This is the location of the timbers I showed you previously in the lock. As I pan the camera, this is the tumble looking east. Continuing southbound on the middle berm, take notice that on the far side of the tumble pool or the channel, you can see that the berm is starting to come back into view again. This berm was the eastern side of the overflow path back to the canal below Lock 71. The middle berm, which ends here, is the exact length of the visible timbers in the dredge and matches the engineered lengths for the locks in this area of the Wabash and Erie Canal. Continuing to look south, you can barely make out a berm in this area. It does get a little convoluted only because there's been so much flooding over the years from Pigeon Creek and Smith Creek spilling out of their banks. It has wiped out a lot of the earthen features here. But thanks to the greenery that is on the ground, you can still make out the berm when you visit this area. Walking south from Lock 71, Through this area, you can kind of get an idea of what is still here. We are in the bed of the canal and we're making our way down to road bridge number 156. Now, once again, you can clearly see on the left side of the screen, the berm has reemerged. It is a well-defined berm, very prominent. The berm is coming back closer to towpath road, thus bringing the canal back down to its original width. Now we will move on to road bridge 156, located south of Lock 71, but north of modern State Road 57. I give unto you the location of road bridge number 156, the Evansville-Petersburg Road. And yes, this is the same road that went through and is the main street of Dongola, discussed in episode 2 of this series. This is the old state road as it was known in the 1820s. How do we know that this was the actual road? Utilizing maps from the period of the canal and after, we are able to locate the approximate location based on the townships and sections, which is how a surveyor's map is laid out. Looking at the trees through here, you can definitely tell there is a roadbed as the trees line each side of this road. Additionally, there are ditches on both sides of the old road for drainage purposes. Another interesting find in this area are the timbers embedded in the eastern bank of the dredged ditch. I believe these could have been timbers from the original road bridge 156 constructed in the 1850s, but there is no way to know if they are from the canal period or not, as this road was utilized all the way up to the 1930s when modern State Road 57 was built. I know that concrete was used on this roadway because it is present on the west side of the canal and was present in the ditch until just recently. But because that the dredge is so deep, it leads me to believe that the County Highway Department may have uncovered some of the original timbers that formed the abutment of the bridge. To the south of this location, there's not a whole lot of canal works left anywhere. Occasionally, the prism becomes somewhat defined, but for the most part, the canal has basically disappeared. The Wabash and Erie Canal continues south through this dredged ditch until it flows into modern Pigeon Creek, at which point both waterways share one path that represents the location of the Wabash and Erie Canal as it leaves Gibson County and enters Warrick County, thus completing this virtual tour of the Wabash and Erie Canal through Gibson County. So let's recap what we visited. We started off just north of the Pike-Gibson County lines in Pike County, and we talked about the canal path from Hosmer down to aqueduct number 17. We went to the site of aqueduct number 17. We left there, we walked to the town of Dongola. We walked through a little bit of the town. From there, we left and meandered our way, stopping along the way, showing you different parts of the canal as we went to Box Culvert 203, Buck Creek, the one that is still in use, and it's almost 200 years old. Then from there, we went over to Cade Creek, and I kind of showed you a little bit there. From Cade Creek, we went to the town of Francisco, the only remaining canal town in Gibson County still functioning. From Francisco, we went to the Pigeon Reservoir, or Pigeon Deep Cut. Along the way, we showed you where the potential tumble in the berm was. We visited a little bit at the Pigeon Deep Cut. From Pigeon Deep Cut, we went over to Pigeon Reservoir. We visited the bottom of the Pigeon Reservoir. Then we went to the dam. Showed you the canal path along that route. Showed you where the feeder would have been. Showed you where the waste weir was, or the overflow was. From there, we went to Port Gibson. discuss the town and a little bit of the history of the area. We made a stop down at Lock 69. Don't let me forget that I mentioned Lock 67 and 68 while we were in Port Gibson. Went to Lock 69 location, identified that area. From Lock 69, we drove down to Lock 70 location. Identified it, identified where the canal crossed underneath Interstate 69. Picked up on the other east side of Interstate 69. Followed the canal path, drove through the bed a little bit. Then brought you down along, in my opinion, the best preserved section of canal in Gibson County. Along County Road 650 East, down to the Smith Fork culvert location. Showed you Lock 71 and showed you where the Evansville-Petersburg Road, or the old state road crossing, was of the canal. It's been hopefully it's been a good experience for you. I have enjoyed this very much, and I'm going to leave it here. Hope you guys have enjoyed, and let me know. Thank you. Goodbye.